Welcome to the CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Dive into a unique narrative with our hosts, Michelle Strasburger, the insightful CHRO, and Dominique Sanfleur, the visionary CXO. Together, they bring dynamic perspectives that ignite thought-provoking dialogue from the C-suite. Each week, join us for electrifying sessions that confront the very challenges modern CXOs navigate in today's fast-paced business landscape. When split-second decisions loom, must it be talent or revenue that takes the hit? Or is there a harmonious crossroad where both can thrive? Can we blur the lines between talent and revenue? In every episode, we provide executive leaders with 3 strategic takeaways, transformative insights that will propel you to master the delicate balance between people and profit. It's not about winners or losers, but crafting an environment where everyone triumphs. Tune in and step closer to redefining executive success.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey. We are here. Welcome. It's Thursday. Fast Thursday this week because it's a short week.
It is. It like all the weeks, it just flies by, and then but I can't decipher whether or not this week has flown by faster than other weeks. It kind of just feels the same, despite the holiday.
I feel like it has school started, so I feel like now we mark time like in hyperspeed. We're in hyperspeed, and soccer started. So we have soccer, school, short week. It's Thursday. It's like hyperspeed.
Well, hopefully we could slow things down a little bit to really dive into this very important topic.
Yes. So yeah, welcome to the CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar. I'm Michelle Strasburger, the CEO of HR Rebooted, where we work with CEOs to build intentional cultures to help them scale their organizations without losing their soul.
Absolutely. And I'm Dominique Sanfleur, CEO of Intramark. We built software in a process as a smoke detector to execution risk, giving leaders early visibility into people factors that disrupt execution. It's called Vibe, Valuable Insights for Better Execution.
So we're talking today about, do your targets accurately reflect potential? And I think this is such a great topic, and we'll probably need more than 30 minutes for it. You posted a link or posted a question on LinkedIn that I think is super relevant and thought-provoking. And it said something to the effect of, your systems determine whether your organization is built to retain B players or only B players. And are you really building systems and processes to attract A players? Or are you wasting potential? And to that effect, should your leaders be held accountable for wasting potential, even if you're meeting the target? So you're meeting targets, everybody's celebrating, but there's still this kind of waste in the organization where there could have been more could have been done, right? There's a potential there, and there's that missed opportunity. And so who could have been held accountable for that? And should leaders be held accountable for that? I think that's a great question. I'm excited to it.
I have a few of those. I have a few of those moments once in a while. But really, it's getting at the crux of, as leaders are setting targets or goals for the organization, right? There's usually not this accurate view of what is the potential of the organization and how do we set targets towards that, right? So this could cut both ways. So it's either an organization that has, let's just use hypothetical numbers as just for grounding. Let's say the potential of an organization is 100, right? One of two things will either happen. Sometimes leaders set goals at 150 without really knowing that the potential for the organization is really just maxed out at 100, right? There's really nothing more to grab. On the converse side, there are leaders that will set targets at 80 when really, a well-humming organization should conceivably achieve that 100, right? And so it's it's looking at targets in a vacuum, or not really setting targets properly with a good view of what is the potential of the organization, and having that discussion, as well, and holding leaders accountable to that potential. And so, there are instances out there where leaders are meeting targets, but there's a lot of waste. And so, how do we think about that as well? It's probably another way to look at it.
Yeah, I think AI also brings this other element to that too, where it allows people to move faster. And I'm pausing as I'm thinking through this because I'm kind of carrying a delicate balance, because I don't want to say, well, AI is the end all be all and it will replace work. And we should expect people to do way more because AI is going to do it all for us. And I still think we live in a world where we expect a lot of people, and there's still a lot of people living in burnout. So that's the delicate balance I'm trying to walk, where there was an article that came out last week or the week before that said AI is giving people some extra time. And so, but they're not using it to do more. They're using it to take a break, right? And to step away and maybe peruse Facebook or social media, or maybe call home or check in with a spouse or something like that. And I don't find fault in that. Maybe if it's abused, okay. But if people need that break, right, for self-care, that's the kind of that delicate balance, right? But I also think as organizations, we struggle with measuring productivity. We also struggle with setting targets, right? What is the right number and how do we get there? Sometimes is this like, which direction is the wind blowing? Like we did 10 million this year. We think we could probably do 12 million this next year. And so what is that right target, and what is that potential? How do our systems play into it? How does our talent play into it? How does AI play into it? And I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And then I think there's this third component of what does kind of meeting expectations look like from a talent management standpoint. And I think we miss the mark on that a lot of times in organizations. And we tend to say like meeting expectations, right, from a number standpoint is like a 3 out of 5 if we're doing a 5-point scale. But like everybody gets a 3, or like it's hard to get a 3. You have to be like overachieving to get a 3. So like the meeting expectations isn't here, the bar is actually here, right? And so it's really your top performers that are getting the 3s or 4s, and nobody gets a 5 because that's hard. That's not achievable. So like meeting expectations is actually overachievement. And so in order for somebody to be meeting the bar, they have to be constantly overachieving or sitting in a seat of burnout. And so I think it's hard. Like I love the idea of like, what's the potential, but all those things have to be taken into account of like, yeah, maybe achievement should be 80 to 120, but why does it have to be 120? Right? Can it be somewhere between that 80 and 120? And I'm not saying we settle for mediocrity, but like what happens if we're at 80 versus 120?
Absolutely. I think you hit on a few very important key points that I want to, go through, starting with the AI point, right? I think what you mentioned with AI is very, very interesting. You probably have two camps when it comes to AI and productivity, right? It's either I use AI to do my job faster, and basically I'm achieving the same level of productivity, but with less time, but I'm not using that extra time, right? The workforce, or, parts of the workforce may not be using that extra time to achieve more, right? It's just getting more, getting the same amount of stuff done in the same window, which is interesting, right? And I think leaders should understand what roles and categories could potentially fall in that bucket, right? And how do you encourage, because that extra time should be you should encourage more innovation, or something should be filling that time.
Or
Not
AI.
necessarily.
AI could be used to innovate. I think we're just scratching the surface with AI, and that can be a whole nother call. That we're just scratching the surface. Like, we're just using it to help with tasks.
Mhm.
We're not really using it to its full extent. And like, there's so much more we're going to do with it. But I was networking with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he sees a doctor regularly, and his doctor's wife is a doctor as well. And in this doctor's practice, he doesn't use AI, but his wife uses AI. And he said, it's interesting because we both used to get home at 10 o'clock at night. And now I still get home at 10 o'clock at night because I don't use AI. But when I get home at 10 o'clock at night, she's already had a glass of wine, a bath, all these things, because she now gets home at 7 o'clock at night. And so it is that kind of delicate balance of like, we don't want our people working till 10 o'clock at night, right? And granted, doctors, that's probably par for the course. That shouldn't be acceptable, but it happens, right? We don't want our people working till 10 o'clock at night. But yes, are there opportunities within a normal work day, right, that we're not stretching people, that we can create some added value using it? Can we lean in and use AI to help with innovation? Can we help upskill and reskill people? Can we help with workflows with AI? There's so much that we can do with it.
There's definitely a lot, right? So that captured time, right, that comes from productivity that AI brings, right? I can get the same amount of work done in less time. There's extra hours that can be used productively, that probably isn't being captured by leaders and employees for certain type of roles. There's the other part of it is, to your point, we don't want to misuse AI as an excuse to just add more work onto people without understanding whether or not the systems and the tools in AI is actually decreasing work. So managing expectations is a very important one. And I think that relates to your other points where this is not an opportunity to find to redefine what meeting the bar is or throwing extra work. It's more getting at looking at the word potential within the realm of not confusing it with how hard can I work people overtime, because that's one way of looking at potential. But I think the more accurate way of looking at potential is how much value can I create within the time that's allotted to me, right? Within a 9 to 5, how much value can I create? And am I creating that value within that same amount of time? If not, what does that potential look like? And am I setting targets accordingly? And so that's probably a tweak there that's important to kind of differentiate. It's not about pushing people to do more work to achieve a higher potential. It's about, with the hours that you have currently, are you maximizing your resources, talent, in a way that is helping you achieve potential, and are you setting targets accordingly to as a reflection of that? So yeah.
It can also help with engagement too, right? If you're doing something, if people have this extra time and they're working on something that gets them excited and engaged, they're going to stay more connected to the organization and more engaged, and they get to come home and say, I worked on this really cool project today that I don't get to normally work on because I had this extra time. Right. And as an A player in an organization, like, those are the things that they want to be working on. That's going to keep them excited and engaged, and leaning into and connecting to that potential is going to help with engagement.
And it's really getting leaders away from that meeting targets only, and more of a mindset of how do we maximize our potential, right? And so maximizing potential, to your point, Michelle, creates an environment that allows A players to continue to stretch, right? It's that environment that attracts A players. I mean, that's where they thrive. When they have that challenging work, it's beyond just compliance. It's more about pushing the boundaries and innovation. And so what does an organization look like when it has enough people that are pushing the boundaries with new thought rather than just doing what needs to be done? And so that's kind of the B player category is, are you creating an environment that is bringing out that discretionary effort from people, that voluntary effort from people, not pushing them to do more work, but wanting them to do more work, right? You're creating want. And, you know, an environment that creates challenge and has, you know, has those opportunities are going to attract A players, and those A players are going to attract more A players. And that's just kind of how an organization is going to snowball to create value in the long term. So I think of organizations like, you know, the classics like Google, right? You know, early days, best and brightest, you know, it wasn't about working a million hours. I'm sure they worked hard, but meeting the full potential of that organization, especially in the early days, and how they were able to do that partly is, you know, bringing in the best and the brightest, but there's no value in bringing in the best and the brightest if you can't retain them. So you need challenging work. You need something that pushes the organization to its potential, and having targets that reflect that, rather than targets or, you know, ambitions, if you will, that reflect the bare minimum. Because again, the market moves, things get more competitive, and, you know, doing the bare minimum or complying is not going to get you know, an organization at the top tier in its category.
I think it comes down to, and it ties into our conversation we had last week of like who's responsible for a bad culture, right? And the same question is, you know, should leaders be responsible for this lost potential? I think it comes down to culture again. And because leaders really, as you're talking through it, I'm thinking like leaders own this, right? They really own this. We had this call yesterday on our HR Rebels call where Dara Bidwell was presenting, and she talked about upskilling and reskilling in her operations team. And she talked about where she built this upskilling and reskilling for her in the plant she worked in. And she was able to imagine this, pull people off of the plant floor to retrain them into technical roles because they were having a hard time recruiting. Like that's like, if anybody is in operations right now, just block your ears, because like that's a nightmare for somebody in the plant, right? To pull people off the plant floor. And when she went through the whole presentation of what she did to upskill and reskill these people, it was really like a big effort to do it. And she worked with some of the local schools and things like that. I mean, this was a huge effort, and it cost over $100,000 to make this happen. And she had leadership buy-in. But what she said at the end was, I wouldn't have been able to do this in any other environment. And that was what it was. It was the environment was conducive for this type of thing. And I really think it comes down to culture at the end of the day. If your culture doesn't support this potential, and when you think about Google back in the day, right, things have shifted. That's why they were able to attract that, because people wanted to be part of that culture. They bought into that. And that's, I think about like some of the performers that last, like the performers like Jimmy Buffett and Taylor Swift and my favorite, Bon Jovi. They create this culture that people buy into, and they want to be part of it. And like, people might not know much about them, but like when kids leave college, they're like, I want to work for Google. They don't know anything about what it's like to work there, but they just are bought into the story of working there. They're bought into the culture. And I think that's what it is. It's, if you can get that buy into that culture that the A players want to be at, then you can harness that potential. It's all part of that culture.
I totally agree, Michelle. And exactly what you said is leaders, what their responsibility is, especially the CEO, and definitely COO as well, with the support of HR. The number one thing that, you know, one of the priorities is, you know, for a leader should be, how do you create an environment, right? The goal is creating an environment. We call it culture, we call it other things, but it's an environment, it's an experience, right? How do I create an environment that allows people to that encourages people to exude that discretionary effort, right? To innovate, to push the boundaries and do more than just mailing in, right? It's about taking care of that environment, creating that environment, curating that environment to make it enticing for an A player to not only get, come in, but make it very enticing for an A player to stay. And it's not about comp, right? Again, it's an environment. Comp isn't an environment. It's one component of it, but it's not. There are plenty of organizations that think throwing, high comp at a problem is going to solve it. That's definitely not it. Well-paid people leave jobs too, so that's not the thing, right? Is what for your industry, for your space, what does a great environment look like, and how do you achieve that environment? And again, think about it as a fishbowl or an aquarium, right? You got to keep that environment clean so that the fish stay happy and healthy. And I don't mean to equate people to fish or anything like that, but it's about that environment, and you got to be an architect of an environment that is gonna get the output that you care about. I think some leaders make the fault, the very inaccurate assumption that we can do the bare minimum with the environment, but still get the results that we want to get long term, and that just doesn't work that way. Everything has a price. So yeah.
Yeah, I do think though people will sacrifice pay for environment.
I think so too.
You think about the people that work for nonprofits and have worked for nonprofits for years and years and years, and they're not making the money they could make elsewhere. I've talked to, when I was at Nix, I was interviewing PhD candidates that were doing research, and they were making, I couldn't believe like $30,000-$40,000. And I'm like, you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a PhD, and that's what you're making, but they're passionate about it and they love the space. And so, they weren't making that at Nix, they were making that doing research. And so, it was really interesting to see, like, people will pay is not the first thing. That's the first thing we go to when we're trying to retain people, but it's not the first thing that people are looking for. It's the environment.
Yeah, pay. The way I like to equate pay is, let's say, for example, you're not having a good relationship with your kid, right? Or, as an example. Mm-hmm. And, the first thing you think about doing is throwing gifts and a bunch of higher allowance or something like that. Like, that's definitely not going to repair that relationship, right? That's not what they need, what a kid needs from you. It's great. It may massage the situation for now, but that is definitely not a long-term situation. This is not how humans work, right? And so the assumption that, you could throw money at the problem and just pay higher or whatever it is and people be happy. Just look at almost any other interpersonal relationship and, ask yourself, does that work? Right. Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, not long term, short term, sure. Someone will be quiet for a little bit if you throw a little bit of money at them, but long term, that's not the foundations of a relationship, right? So if it's not going to work in other areas in our lives, it's probably not going to work, that well in a workforce environment.
A great litmus test.
Yeah. So it's a great that's exactly what it is. It's a litmus test, right? If it's not going to work in other situations, it's probably not going to work here because humans are involved. So it's really, again, some people call it culture. I think for the people, the people who are more systematic thinkers, I think the word environment is a little bit more graspy, right? Culture is like, what is that exactly? That becomes another conversation. But environment kind of seems for systems thinkers, right? Kind of seems like an approachable concept. Is when that employee walks in, is what's going on around them conducive for them to bring great work, at the forefront, or are there structural issues that are getting in the way of that person's motivation?
A lot of red tape,
Um,
right? A lot of bureaucracy. I have a great example. So I was at a company once and we wanted to create innovation. We're like, why aren't we having innovation? We want more innovation. We want more. And so we created this like, let's incentivize people, right? We always put money first. Money talks.
Mm.
So we created this incentive. If you come up with an idea that either increases revenue or saves money, we will give you a bonus that's a percentage of whatever that turns out to be. So whatever the revenue is, up to like $50,000, like huge, big money, right? Guess how many ideas we got?
I'm a goose egg.
Zero. We changed the culture. We did a full revamp of the culture and the environment, and we got rid of that program. And we had innovation abundance.
Yep.
It totally changed everything.
Yeah, is the environment creating enough motivation, right? And that's what it boils down to.
Create space for it, right? Are we when we're pushing people, like think of ourselves too, when we're pushing ourselves nonstop, we're in email all the time, we're in meetings all the time. Like, are we creative? No, we're exhausted. We want to go home and have a glass of wine and get in the bath. That's it. We don't want to think anymore. We want to watch silly TV and that's it.
Yeah. And so bringing it full circle to our topic, right? Do your targets accurately reflect potential? So I think another way to ask that question is, what does my organization look like with maximum motivation, right? If I created an environment in my organization that maximized motivation, which again is not, you could try and think it's money. It's harder than that. It's harder than that. The answer is harder than just throwing money at it, right? It's a harder question. It's a harder thing to do, but it's creating an environment that maximizes motivation in people. And if you do that, what's possible for your organization? What does your organization look like, right? 100 million in revenue, maybe that's winning for your industry or space based on historical numbers, whatever it is. But is your potential actually 250 million? And leaders don't really get punished for leaving money on the table, right? Nor, is there really a mechanism to measure how much value is being left on the table? But there is value being left on the table that can be captured with pulling the right levers, which often, I think, lie with creating sufficient motivation in an environment, or having an environment that creates sufficient motivation to bring out A players, to bring out maximum potential, maximum innovation, discretionary effort that pushes the organization further. And what does that missed potential look like? And should organizations take a deeper dive at trying to measure how much value is actually being left on the table?
Yeah, I have this quote that I like to use when I'm talking to organizations about culture. It's a study that was done by Hendrick and Struggle, and they did some research, and they discovered an interesting subset of companies, those that approach their culture initiatives with a strategic intent, labeling them as culture accelerators. They found that these organizations followed a people-first approach across the board and had better financial performance than the rest of the surveyed group. Their reports that culture accelerator companies' compound annual growth rate was 9.1% versus 4.4%. So more than double, right? Any other companies. But the interesting fact, what I found on this, because you could say to me, yeah, that's startups, yeah, that's tech companies, whatever. They also learned that this phenomenon occurred in companies of all sizes in every sector across the globe. Isn't that phenomenal? So I think your point there of like, what can I do to create an environment that will accelerate my company? And then what does that look like at the end of the day for growth?
Yeah.
How does that affect my targets?
Exactly. And sorry, say again?
Because it has an impact.
100%, right? And it's hard. I think the reason why a lot of some leaders may miss that is like, I wish we could create an alternate universe, right? Where we had one organization, same thing, same people, one environment, again, alternate universe, same organization, same people, but XYZ environment, and see the performance of both those organizations, right? And because we can't do that, there's a lot of wasted potential in that. But you hit it on the head, right? It's create an environment that maximizes motivation for your workforce, right? How do you maximize motivation? And that itself is what's going to maximize potential for the organization, because all the ideas that are unsaid, that would be said, but that not motivated to be said, will come out to the surface. All the effort that does exist but is not motivated to come out would come out. And all those incremental on the margin improvements and contributions to our organization make compounding differences that result in a lot of value for an organization. But if people aren't motivated to bring that forward, there's a lot of value that could be compounded that is not. So
Exactly. Exactly. Before we hang up, I just want to acknowledge Erwin. Hi, Erwin. You and I are like ships passing in the night to get on the calendar. I'll send you a message because I owe you one, because we could dive into this comment separately, because I think there's a lot there. I think with AI, so Erwin's question is around AI and how do you kind of bridge the gap between like technology shifts in the organization and then bringing people up to speed in AI. So more people are like, we want AI, but our technology is old and we're not willing to invest in AI and invest in technology and invest in training. How do you kind of bridge that gap? I think there's people that are either like using AI and just scratching the surface, and then there's people that are not, and there's like fear of AI. And so there's a gap there to be bridged. And this is like a whole nother call, which we'll have in the future, a whole nother conversation. But I think some of it needs to start with training and education, and Writing IO does a great job at that. And I'll share some of that in the links as well. But I think that's a good place to start, is just building awareness and building trust with AI. I think right now, especially since some of the AI tools are still fairly new and people are just like, I don't trust it. I don't know if I should trust it. I don't know what it's doing. And it's everywhere, right? We start talking about sneakers. Now I'm going to say sneakers and I'm going to go to Facebook and it's going to be all sneaker ads. So it's everywhere in our lives. And so I think people are hesitant just because they don't know yet what they don't know about it. And so we have to just start educating and teaching people about it. So, but more to come, and we'll get some time on the calendar.
Absolutely.
Good to see you here. Thank you for joining, Erwin. So more exciting topics to come. Thank you for joining us. This was a great conversation, Dominique. I always enjoy Thursdays at the bar with you.
One of the best days, something I look forward to. So it's definitely highlights of my week. So thank you so much.
Until next week, cheers.
You've just experienced another episode of The CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next week at noon Eastern for more strategic content to help you scale your business. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube for additional content or episodes you may have missed. The links will be in the comments section. If you'd like more information or to schedule time with Michelle or Dominique, follow the link in the comments section to book time on their calendar. Until next week, cheers.